Bonsoir tout le monde. Hello everybody. First, I will speak in French. Sorry, Paniel. Just to introduce this conference and this seminar. Bonsoir tout le monde. Merci d'être là avec nous ce soir. On était samedi avec Jean-Marc. On a parlé de l'universalité de la science. C'était une conférence très intéressante avec tout un débat très passionnant et très stimulant. Aujourd'hui, on a vraiment avec nous un grand, on peut dire, spécialiste du pragmatisme et de la philosophie américaine ou de la philosophie anglo-saxonne. Et on sait très bien que cette philosophie dépend largement de des questions qui sont relatives au pragmatisme et au pragmaticisme, parce que vous savez, il y a beaucoup de différences entre pragmatisme peut-être et pragmaticisme. Et donc, j'ai le plaisir ce soir vraiment d'accueillir Paniel Reyes Cardenas de l'Université de Mexico au Mexique, et qui va nous parler en anglais, pas en espagnol, ni en français. Donc, en anglais, qui va nous parler sur un sujet, je peux dire, inédit, qui n'est jamais, pour moi en tout cas, exploré, qui est la possibilité de mettre en rapport spiritualité. Je ne sais pas dans quel sens tu vas, Paniel, prendre ce terme ou ce concept de spiritualité et en mettre en relation la spiritualité avec le pragmatisme. Donc on a, je trouve que c'est vraiment, il y a des travaux qui sont très rares là-dessus, et donc ce qui donne à la conférence de ce soir une importance, une valeur, on peut dire incommensurable, hein. Et ça va donner une importance à cette conférence ce soir et à tout le débat qui va suivre cette conférence, parce que j'en suis sûr, la conférence de Paniel va stimuler en nous beaucoup de questions, beaucoup d'interrogations, et ça dépend bien sûr de en quel sens Paniel ce soir va prendre le terme de spiritualité, et est-ce que en rapport avec la religion ou bien de façon tout à fait, on peut dire, laïque. Okay, so welcome, Paniel. I'm very glad that you accepted my invitation here to come to speak with us. And of course, we can ask you questions later after the conference in French or in Arabic. I can translate to you, or you can answer directly in English. So the conference will be in English, but the debate or the discussion can be in French or in Arabic. So thank you, Paniel. Really thank you for you, not only for the fact that you accept my invitation this evening, but you are always cooperating with us on the Al Mukhatabat project. You was interested first by this journal, and you was a writer in its issues. I think many times. I don't remember exactly, but anyway, I remember
We have,
your.
we have some history, yes.
So I will give you a, comment on dit, je vais vous donner la parole. I will let you speak about 60 minutes or 1 hour. And then after we will get the pleasure, the opportunity to discuss with you. Voilà. It's,
Merci
comment
beaucoup.
on dit, up to you, Paniel?
Yes, yes, perfect. Very well said. Merci beaucoup, merci beaucoup. Je fais l'introduction en français et la présentation en anglais. Bonsoir à tous. En Tunisie et dans le monde entier, je suis la rencontre de Almut Katabat. Merci à mon ami Andy Mlika pour son invitation et l'organisation de cet événement, ainsi que toutes les personnes impliquées. Je m'appelle Paniel Reyes Cardenas, je suis maître de conférences et doctorant en spiritualité à l'Oblique School of Theology, San Antonio, Texas, in the United States, les États-Unis. Je suis également chercheur associé à l'Université de Sheffield, à l'Angleterre, où j'ai obtenu mon doctorat en philosophie il y a quelques années. Comme vous pouvez l'imaginer, mon français n'est pas parfait. Je m'exprimerai donc en anglais. pour le reste de la présentation. Je parlerai pendant environ 45 minutes, puis je répondrai à vos questions. Maybe a little bit more than 45 minutes. Well, I shift to English now.
Take your time anyway.
My try.
Take your
Thank
time.
you, my friend Hamdi. Let me say just a few words of introduction to the presentation. This is a very recent work I've been working on. I am producing a monograph, hopefully will come out with Bloomsbury Academic, and it's been the result of my last work on the issue of how to give philosophical foundations to the study of spirituality. Because of these, as you probably remember from the introduction, I was saying that I'm a PhD student in San Antonio, Texas, on spirituality, and one of the things that became very salient to me, and partly that was one of the reasons I got invited to participate in this PhD, is to bring a suitable philosophical framework for spirituality. I'll try to explain a little bit more about what we mean academically by the concept of spirituality, because obviously it's a very ample concept and needs clarification. But also I must say that it's a very recent a very recent discipline of study, different to theology, different to for example, philosophy of religion, different from the anthropological study of religion. It's very different to all these subjects, because mostly more than focusing on the study of direct propositions, claims of the different religions, or claims of the different religious groups, or interpretations of their beliefs, it focuses on the issue of how is this translates into an experience of a transformative experience of the transcendent. So spirituality is the academic study of spirituality is the academic study, the systematic study of how these claims for experience of the divine, both individual and communal, can be expressed in ways that enrich our understanding of what we're living through. So obviously, this implies that there's an element of interest in the study of spirituality of the mystical tradition, of all different religious traditions. For example, the Sufi mystics, the medieval mystics, or for example, I, as an Orthodox Christian, we have the mysticism of the Hesychast spirituality. So there's a very large number of fascinating liminal experiences that seem to be a hallmark not only of a particular religion, but of all the human experience that tries to express the deep transformative encounter with the divine. And I'm going to use the words of a professor of mine, which is Father Ron Rolheiser in San Antonio. He is a very popular writer in the United States about the issue of spirituality. And I like very much how he defines spirituality. He defines spirituality as this fire that is within us and that needs to be focused into something in order to be used for the betterment of humanity. So in that sense, spirituality is this energy, is this force of desire for transcendence that is expressed in different spheres of the human experience. Now, having said that, having explained a little bit about what the academic spirituality is, I'd like to say a little bit about what kind of philosophy can serve as a background for this study. And let me tell you that in my well, short experience of the understanding of spirituality, the founding fathers and mothers of this study of spirituality, especially, I'm going to say in the United States, is very clear that the academic study of spirituality has been born around theological circles in a desire to have a shift of theology to experience. In a way, and you'll see why I'm trying to explain this. I'm stopping for a few minutes just to try to explain this landscape. So one of these founding mothers of the discipline is a theologian that is still alive. She's amazing biblical scholar. Her name is Sandra Schneiders. She's based in well, she is retired now, but she was based in Berkeley, California, and her is considered one of the founding members of what is the academic study of spirituality. But she, as she studied in France, under a fascinating number of great theologians, including I got this as a personal confession of her to me. She said to me that when she was in Paris, she had the enjoyment of study on the Gadamer hermeneutics and a little bit on the famous Orthodox theologian called Paul Evdokimov. And she was saying that her interest in spirituality sparked from seeing these people not only committed to the understanding of the issue of a spiritual and mystical experience, but also a self-implicating dimension. So part of the study of spirituality has a self-implicating dimension that I want to emphasize today. And another fascinating founding father of the discipline is Chicago theological school scholar, Professor Bernard McGinn, who has done a lot of fascinating work on unearthing some of the more intricate and difficult intellectual approaches to the mystical experience in the Western tradition, particularly for example, he is an expert in a great very number of medievals, European medievals that have written about spirituality. One of those being a big interest of mine, that and Bernie McGinn has a fascinating book on him, is Meister Eckhart, for example. So the origin of the discipline of spirituality had this dimension of people doing, on the one hand, a search for understanding this self-implicating dimension that I just mentioned, but also associated with studies in the history of mysticism. But these studies in the history of mysticism have been devoted to particular figures that have been, paradigms of these wonderful experiences. And maybe the grandfather of the discipline is American philosopher and psychologist William James. William James published this all-time bestseller, which is The Varieties of Religious Experience, which was the result of the Gifford lectures that he gave in Scotland in the beginning of the 20th century. And in this fascinating book that has been also very criticized, so much is been the object of many, many criticisms, especially for the ways in which he defines mystical experience, has been a heavily criticized book that nonetheless is the first study not of what the religious claims of the of characters that over history have been studying different aspects of different have reported experiences of the numinous experiences of the total otherness. He has studied these characters, not as a psychologist, not as a philosopher, not as a theologian. He has studied them from the point of view of their reports of their own experience. And from that, he developed a fascinating typology of what he calls the sick soul, for example. And William James tells us to look not at the fruits, not at the roots of religious experience, because we could, if we just purely examine these characters over the hundreds of years that we have testimonies of people who lived these unusual experiences of the divine, we could easily dismiss them as crazy people, as Foucault said, for example. We could easily dismiss them as people who, in other words, strange things that happen to weird people. But
in marge.
Exactly. It's an image that has been transmitted over the years. But the first one is taking them seriously and saying, maybe these people were indeed deranged with different mental diseases. But the important thing is not only what the roots of their beliefs are, but what are the fruits? How do they transform the world around them by sharing these experiences? So in this sense, this is the inaugural theatrice of the academic study of spirituality in some way, because it studies the way in which people experience the divine. Now, so these founding mothers and fathers of the tradition are people who are fascinating, but they did have a number of philosophical commitments before studying spirituality. For example, Sandra Schneider studied hermeneutics, like I said, with Gadamer and others, and Professor Bernie McGinn, he has been reliant in a Jesuit theologian called Bernard Lonergan, a Canadian Jesuit theologian, who is a very fascinating writer, theologian, and also philosopher, but in a way presents a philosophy that is very modern in spirit, very Kantian in its shaping. And other people have tried to do the study of spirituality, or give a philosophical background to spirituality by using critical theory, for example, or by using postmodern philosophy. My concern with this approach is that many of these philosophies, as opposed to doing a service of grounding a good understanding of experience, sometimes what they do is they scatter and fragment experience because they have a lot of modern commitments. In other words, many of them have the Cartesian commitment that there's a subjective experience and a subjective experience from the outside. Or in other words, the Kantian, there's the noumenal world of the things outside, and the phenomenal world that I can just report secondarily. But there's experience seems to be some kind of veil, something that divides us from reality. And to me, that is a bit of a problem, because it generates a number of dichotomies that will put in trouble the description of experience. And in thinking about this, I am not the only one. There's a number of scholars that think that spirituality will be better served by a good philosophy of experience. And in this sense, pragmatism, one of the hallmarks of pragmatism, classical American pragmatism, is a very deep philosophy of experience. It's a very deep philosophy of experience, And in this sense, I think, and I propose that it can render a very good service to the study of spirituality, not only the study of spirituality, obviously, it does a great service to philosophy nowadays, but also to the study of spirituality. It provides an adequate understanding of the richness of experience. And in doing that, I am in my monograph, I'm producing a monograph talking about these issues. I already published an article in a Brazilian journal called Esferas, in a special issue on pragmatism, obviously, and semiotics, um, uh, edited by my good friend Patricia Fanaya and my good friend uh, Professor Borges. They both accepted this contribution, but it's really the landscape, the proposal of what I want to do. So what I'm going to do now, I don't want to tire you with this long introduction, but
No,
what
it's
I'm going
something
to
original and new for me personally.
Thank you. Yes, yes. I think this is the approach I'm presenting is actually quite new. It's quite new, and the book will come out shortly, hopefully, and hopefully with the book we will have a more rich discussion maybe in the future for Al Mukabata. Yeah.
Welcome, of course.
Of course, I'm like Hamdi expressed. I'm a very a big enthusiast, a big fan of his work and of
Thank
Al
you very
Mukabara.
much.
I have contributed a number of times with different articles. I remember we did a very memorable,
About
well, Hamdi did a very edited a very memorable volume on Robert Brandon, for example, some time ago, and it was, or we did I did an obituary of Hilary Putnam, a number of things. We have
yeah,
done a number of things. Lately, I published with a student of mine, Simone, on aesthetics and pragmatism. So I'm very, very happy to keep, the discussion, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Hamdi, but
yes.
in Arabic, al-mukatabat means the
Al
discussion.
al al-mukhatabat
Al-mukhatabat means
Mukhatabat
discussion.
means, yeah, dialogues or discussions or
Exactly.
conversation or speech acts. Speech acts also
Exactly.
we can, a discourse in action or in dialogue.
I love that. That
This is
sounds
thought. I think thinking is always with others. Others is
that
not.
sounds.
There is no self-thinking. I think. Well, it's
I
the
love it.
origin, the root of philosophy with Plato is the dialogue. Dialogue.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Dialogos, right? Like reasoning across each other. I love it. I love it. And I do
And
remember the first time I touched the topic with my students, obviously with my terrible pronunciation of the Arabic terms. It was the that
yeah,
even
uh,
seen volumes
yeah.
of this
The
the
word, because al-mukhatabat is the plural of mukhataba. Mukhataba was used by Al-Farabi in the
ah
19th, in
even
the,
Farabi
yes,
earlier
in
than
the,
even seen.
since a long time, and by a mystic, very famous in Baghdad in the 10th century. It's a Nifari. He was writing a great of mystical book about al-Mawaqif and al-Mukhatabat, and from these traditions. I got the idea to give to the journal the name of Al-Mukhatabat. But Al-Mukhatabat has mystical significance, but epistemological and linguistic significance. It's the same, are all together.
That sounds amazing. And exactly is the point of my observation that what we want to do is to enrich this philosophical landscape by putting up a philosophical approach that is consistent enough to express the richness of experience. And even and I'm gonna say something very short now, but but for example, in studying William James and Charles Sanders Peirce and particularly Josiah Royce, Josiah Royce is a very little known American philosopher. He's mostly known as an idealist, but in my opinion, he's one of the towering pragmatists. And I will explain why in its moment. But basically, what I want to say is that in the richness of experience, there is also the richness of reasoning together, of understanding each other by understanding things. For example, when I understand, for example, as Hamdi explained to me what al-mukhatabat means, I understand Hamdi and I understand my understanding of the discussions, of the dialogues, and I understand myself as understanding it. So there's a very many levels of reflective understanding that are part of my experience of this moment. And a purely empirical approach to experience is very limited because it doesn't have these deep levels of reflective understanding that are part of reality. As, for example, philosopher John McDowell will say, we live in a space of reasons. And this space of reasons is not just a construction it's not just an ideal construction to express things. It's a reality because it transforms the things, the ways in which we experience things. So in that sense, the classical American pragmatists, especially Charles Sanders Peirce, William James, and Josiah Royce, they offer to us a very powerful philosophy of experience. And that's what I want to talk about, how this philosophy of experience can help us underpin, put the foundations of a set of philosophical foundations for a rich understanding of a spiritual experience. Obviously, of experience in general, but in this particular case, when we talk about spirituality, spiritual religious experience. So in that sense, that's the plan. So let me read a little bit of the paper to you, so you can understand a little bit more about what I'm trying to achieve with this. So to the question, what is religious experience? As we said, the study of spirituality addresses the complex nature of religious experience and the challenges in understanding and articulating such experiences, which with such a study, questions regarding the relationship between religious experience and belief, the interpretative process of religious experience, and the role of mediating in understanding them are properly engaged. The discipline of the academic study of spirituality grapples with intellectual efforts that discuss these issues of philosophical, epistemological, theological, and metaphysical in nature. Obviously, though pre-medieval spirituality has left a rich heritage, we need to consider that we live in a time of dialectic between a modern and a postmodern age. With the onset of modernity, marked by the Reformation, Enlightenment, and scientific advancements, the Western metaphysical and epistemological framework shifted radically from the medieval Christian paradigm and the medieval synthesis, or even the Islamic philosophy, the philosophy of the Islamic world, that is very reliant in a harmonization of Plato and Aristotle, a rich experience that doesn't see the human being as fundamentally capable of understanding the world in which this human being lives. So the first people who studied spirituality were very marked by this modern chasm between experience and subject. So let me give you an example. Friedrich Schleiermacher's position in this historical context is examined by considering how enlightenment, for example, rationalism reshaped anthropological perspectives. Thus, for example, reading Schleiermacher's speeches on religion provides insight into his view of religious experience, its mediation as in contrast with Enlightenment rationalism. So, for example, what Schleiermacher tries to do is to negotiate this radical instrumental understanding of human reason as capable of interpreting every aspect of human experience. And in this, he feels like religion is left out because religion examines dimensions of that rationalism doesn't quite grasp. But then the problem with Schleiermacher is that he sends philosophy just to the sentimental feeling experience. So even though there's a great insights in people like Schleiermacher, it still is just a feeling. It's just something that reason cannot quite grasp. My opinion, the issue with this modern approach to spirituality is that presupposes a dichotomy between reason and emotion, for example. So everything that will be emotional will be, by definition, irrational, or the other way around. If something is purely rational, doesn't have to do anything with emotions. But the classical view is different, and in this sense, the pragmatists, such as Charles Sanders Peirce, they propose us to go back to the medieval and say, like, look, let's get rid of these unjustified dichotomies. For example, between reason, theoretical reason, and action, between subjective experience and objective facts, between values and reasons, between emotions and rational thinking, etc., right? Or between individual and community. So there's a number of one of the hallmarks of pragmatism, like, for example, Richard Bernstein, a scholar who passed not too many years ago, says in his famous book, one of his last books called The Pragmatic Turn, is that pragmatism criticizes unjustified dichotomies of modernity. And in this way, pragmatism is a good alternative to postmodern philosophy. I'm not going to criticize postmodern philosophy, but sometimes, in my opinion, postmodern philosophy just repeats the dichotomies of modernities by exaggerating them. And pragmatism has more a view of criticized by understanding the continuity that is behind things, understanding what's the mediation between these dichotomies. So, having said that, what I want to say basically is that pragmatism is a tradition in philosophy that criticizes modern foundationalism and advocates for a departure from the dichotomies of modernity. Pragmatism, for example, as articulated by Charles Sanders Peirce and William James, underscores the continuity and non-discreteness of human experience, challenging traditional modern dichotomies. This atomist view of experience, like we have chunks of experience, separated, fragmented experiences. And what William James demonstrates in his psychology, and Charles Sanders Peirce with his theory called synergism, is that experience is always continuous. Peirce and the pragmatists created a philosophy of experience. Peirce's semiotics proposes a rigorous science of signs that helps us mediate the understanding of that experience, which he considers the logic of thought. This view implies that our understanding of the world is mediated by signs, aligning with Peirce's classification of experience into three universes of experience. And I'm not going to get down into all the details of Peirce's metaphysics of experience, but let me just say a little bit. He proposes firstness, secondness, and thirdness. Firstness is possibility, secondness is facts, And thirdness is continuity and regularity of experiences. For example, if we wanted to understand the medieval problem of universals, they will belong to the category of thirdness because they are regularities that apply, the one that applies to many. For example, if we wanted to explain the universal humanity, we could say that the thirdness is the shared humanity, the secondness is the particular instantiation in each of us of human beings, and the firstness, the possibility of these to develop into a richer future expression of humanity. With let me say, yes, religious experience, according to Peirce, then, intersects with these universes, with firstness establishing the possibility of a transcendent relationship, with secondness manifesting as individual experiences of the transcendent, and with thirdness exploring the regularities of communal transcendent manifestations, as it will be explained further down in this work. Now, let's move a little bit on to William James. So what do we get from Peirce in just a few words? From Peirce, we get this categorical framework that helps us understand that experience is presented itself to us as in three ways: firstness, possibilities; secondness, direct resistance of what we call the real; and thirdness, the regularities that and the patterns that emerge in the continuous experience. Now, let's talk a little bit about William James. William James, while sharing a similar emphasis on the continuity of experience, offers a more dynamic and open conception. His approach to religious experience focuses on its transformative value and pragmatic consequences, what he says in the varieties of religious experience. Let's look at the fruits, not at the roots. Advocating for belief based on the fruits of religious experience rather than its roots. I repeated that. Below in this particular work, I will offer a revised Jamesian account of religious experience, but more integrated with his other philosophy. Now, what is the other philosophy that I'm interested in talking from William James, and what he calls radical empiricism? William James's radical empiricism is different to traditional British empiricism. In what sense? Well, traditional British empiricism thinks that only what we experience is real. But how does it understand this experience? Well, as the data that our senses offer to us, right? And the issue with this idea is that we get, for example, in Locke, we get the ideas that emerge from experience. In Berkeley, we get a similar experience of bundles of perceptions, and in Hume, for example, we just get impressions. And the issue with this way of conceiving experience is that imposes on experience a nominalist prejudice, or at least Peirce will tell us so. And William James will agree with Peirce on this, because it is almost as though we are spectators, as John Dewey will say. John Dewey, another pragmatist, John Dewey will say this: the spectator theory of belief, which is the idea that I am a passive receptacle of what is happening outside the realm of my sense data. But this presupposes that we're just passive spectators, we're just passive receptacles of experiences. But if we look, and William James studied this very deeply, if we look at our own experiences, we couldn't make sense of our own experience without inference. For example, we use let's I have a lot of examples, but let me give you just one. When we use our eyes, we use the distance between our eyes, the parallax between our eyes to gauge distance. So if I focus, for example, here in the screen where I am seeing my good friends listening to the talk, but then I turn around and I see my brother's dog over there, then my perception of the different objects in the room is pervaded by the way in which I construct the relationship between things as they work around me. So my experience of particular things is already mediated by my own understanding of that experience. So there's no experience unmediated. William James says, otherwise will be a buzzing, blooming confusion. Like the baby, for example, when the baby opens the eyes for the first time, doesn't have sense of objects, doesn't have sense of what is one thing and another, doesn't even distinguish himself from the world. The self is something that emerges as we make sense of our experiences and our experiences of the others. So in that sense, and Josiah Royce will say something very nice about this, but let me say something more about William James. So William James proposes his radical empiricism, and the point of his radical empiricism is that everything that is present in experience should be considered experience, including the relationships between different experiences. So in that sense, I'm not going to call experiences only to the objects that are identified through my experience in them or my perception of them. My sensation already is predisposed in the way it is because my perception is mediated by inference and my past experiences of relationships, habits created by the experience relationships. So let me give you an example. If I was a wine taster, I will, for me, I mean, the real Paniel is not a wine taster. I mean, I like wines, but if you really ask me, I'm not going to be able to distinguish a good one from a bad one. Well, maybe if the bad one is too bad, I will be able to distinguish, but not like a professional, right? But the professional has technically should have the same sensitivity that a person ignorant like me will have of the same glass of wine. But what does it change between him or her and me? Well, that this person is capable of reflecting on that experience and experiencing at a deeper level the same elements of sense of perception. So in that sense, it's his or her ability to experience, her predispositions to experience already alter the reports of that experience. So in a way, what I'm trying to say is our preparation to the world, to the different universes of experience, help us to mediate experience better. So, this is one in many examples, but for example, there's films in which a person who is heavily trained, for example, for combat, enters a room and finds whatever is suitable for escaping, for example. I like action. I sometimes I get a little bit of relaxation by looking at action films, action movies. and I like The Bourne, for example, the Bourne ones with Matt Damon. And what he does is he looks at the room and finds everything that he can use to escape or to attack, etc., etc. Well, obviously, this predisposition to experience a space transforms the way in which we relate with the world. Now, getting more serious, how does this have a bearing when we really care about experience of the transformative, transcendent relationship with the divine? Then if this predisposition is mediated by a reflective understanding of these experiences, then we will be more ready to give a more accurate report of these universal kind of patterns of human experience when human experience talks about the mystic or the divine. Finally, and because I want to give some time for questions, and I notice that I'm talking too much. Let me give you so Peirce has this idea that we have three universes of experience: firstness, secondness, and thirdness. Okay, so in my book project, Peirce will represent firstness. I mean, the study of experience as possibility, experience as in the potential indeterminacy, will help us make sense of what we call the ineffable, what we call what is beyond us, the fundamental openness of human beings to whatever is superior to them. And in this sense, this first sense of experience has this insightful connection with the life of the artist, for example. An artist is a person who is fundamentally open to experience things in new ways, in ways in which normally didn't expect, didn't were accounted in the past. And in that sense, for example, even this, for Peirce, the scientist is a person who is fundamentally open to experience because he's ready to be surprised. So a scientist, an artist, is somebody who is deeply committed to the reality of possibility. For secondness, though, which is the particular reports of experiences, I think my book will take the work of William James in the varieties of religious experience and will articulate James's radical empiricism to make sense of those in the context of his pragmatist philosophy. And for the thirdness, so the secondness, as we mentioned before, it was the one-to-one kind of experience of things as individual, right? Or as resisting us. For example, let me give you a quick example of secondness. I might want to not believe that there's a wall behind me, but in the moment in which I punch the wall, the wall resists my punching. So in that sense, even if I wanted to believe that there's no wall behind me, reality will convince me otherwise because it will resist me. So, so in this sense, it's very important, James says, to take experience very seriously. You know, like we cannot believe in what whimsically in whatever we want. Why? Because reality will resist us. And for thirdness, but William James, in his varieties of religious experience, he studied the particular experiences of people who had some experience of the divine. He did many reports of them, but also the issue is that it's an incomplete work. And what he did not do is making an explanation of how this connects with his understanding of experience in radical empiricism. But his focus of religious experience was always in the individual. But then it comes a third pragmatist, which is Josiah Royce. Now, Josiah Royce has this philosophy of community. And for Josiah Royce, William James was limited in his understanding of religious experience because always was talking about individuals having such and such experiences. But for Royce, the real value of religious experience is given not in the individual, but in community. Now, the individual obviously has particular experiences that are relevant to her or his life. However, the individual is not enough to give sense of those experiences. We have to get a communal understanding. We have to have a dialogue between each other to unearth and discover the true meaning of those experiences in the context of a tradition, for example. And in this sense, what Josiah Royce tells us is that we don't only have to look for religious experiences in particular for individual beings, we have to look for religious insight made in a community. So he proposes that the community is always mediating our understanding of the transformative aspect, the transformative search of meaning and the transcendent through a particular religious framework. And in this sense, what Josiah Royce proposes is that in order for our experiences to be interpreted correctly, we need a community that shares with us a common past, what he calls the community of memory, and it shares with us a common set of values for the future, which he calls a community of hope. And in this sense, a community that helps us to interpret our own transcendent experiences of the divine, will extract from it a religious insight that will help us to understand each other and to help and to construct community with others. So in this sense, what I've been trying to do with this presentation is show you that with classical pragmatism, we can get different examples of how to unearth the true richness of experience. With Peirce, we can understand the possibility of experience. With William James, we can understand the secondness, the actuality of experience, how we can make sense of the reports of particular individual people who claim having these transformative experiences of the divine. But then we cannot forget about the mediating community that creates meaning together and affects our understanding and our experience by giving us religious insight. In this sense, I think this rich philosophy of experience can make a good service to the study of spirituality. It could help us not only to give a finished definition of a religious or a spiritual experience, but to understand that it's always open-ended. It's always open-ended, and in that sense, we are fallibilist. First defended the doctrine of fallibilism, which later on Karl Popper called falsationism. But the point of it is that we never have a full, because concepts and beliefs are habits of the mind. Our habits are never ended. They're always developing and finding a stronger and stronger understanding of things, but they never fully settle. And we can always be mistaken about an understanding of an aspect of reality. So in that sense, religious experience is fundamentally an open-ended habit of a community that tries to understand the transformative experience of the divine. But what pragmatism gives us, though, is not only a way of approaching experience, but a way of approaching experience that doesn't let us be separated by dichotomies from that experience. like it helps us to question how something is an unjustified dichotomy. Let me finish this short presentation with a concluding thought. Both Peirce and James emphasize the continuity of experience. A natural consequences of this is the discreteness of perception and the overcoming of dichotomies related to experience. Semiotics is a rigorous science of science that makes sense of this. In other words, semiotics is a logic of science. Since all thoughts are science, this means that the logic of science is prescriptive to the logic of thought. Our understanding mediated by science is also our understanding of the world. The study of semiotics as a way to approach the hermeneutics of religious experience is very relevant in this sense. Semiotics is a rigorous science that prescribes the universes of experience because religious experience gains reflected clarity belonging to each of the universes of experience. When we make sense of experience, we're discovering the intricate relationships between the different aspects of experience, and then we can construct a sense of it, a reflective understanding of it. Firstly, the possibility of religious experience is mediated by the category of fairness. This category concerns possible experience, establishing the possibility of a relationship and experience of the transcendent. Secondly, the actual particular experiences lived by individuals are constrained in space and time. This is evident in the fact that people report experiences of the transcendent. And thirdly, the category of fairness explores the regularities and relationships that constitute experience. For example, it examines how a community can manifest the transcendent, as Josiah Royce calls in the concept of religious insight. Of course, Peirce's focus was on science, but Royce realized the massive potential of Peirce's semiotic in the formation of a community that embodies loyalty as the highest expression of religious insight. Royce envisioned this ideal relation of the absolute and the community in the vertical and horizontal value of the beloved community. Royce criticized James for having a very individualistic account of religious experience, limiting religious experience to the category of secondness. And just to finish this presentation, let me tell you that this idea of Josiah Royce of the religious insight helps us to envision the ideal as an open-ended goal of universal community in which that is marked by loyalty, and he called the beloved community. This had a very, very powerful impact in Martin Luther King Jr. He talks about Martin Luther King did this all civil defense of the rights of the Black people by thinking in the ideal of the beloved community as the open-ended completion of everything that is valuable in a set of the Christian belief. So in that sense, the true hallmark of a good spiritual experience is that basically transforms the world, makes it more just, makes it more fair, makes it more improves the quality of our relationships with each other. So in this sense, there's many more things to say about the value of the academic study of spirituality by the use of pragmatism, not only because it gives a good foundation to it, but also because it gives a good perspective for the future. Sometimes the other studies can be just historical and they remain as curiosities in the history of thought. But the idea is not only to do that, but construct a universal community in which we make a better world than the one we live in. And unfortunately, at this moment, our world is full of wars, it's full of misunderstanding between each other. But how can we construct a community of shared loyalty into the highest values, and that connects us more to the ideal, which is in this case the divine as an eternally loving reality. So in that sense, well, sorry, I said many things. I'm sure you'll have questions to clarify, but at least I wanted to give this kind of bird's eye view, right? Like a very ample
Yes.
vision project. And sorry for taking longer than I
No,
expected.
it's 1 hour. It's the right time. You deserve more time, I think, because the quality of your topic and it's something really interesting, and especially the conclusions. We agree about your conclusion. Maybe we disagree about some points of your approach, but I think, agree totally about the conclusion that we cannot use any kind of spirituality or religious experience or life to justify war or to justify the conflict between humans. Because sometimes in context of the war actually between Russian and Ukrainian and European, they talk about religious war. I think it's completely wrong to say that the war could be justified by any reference to religious or spirituality. I would like to thank you for your conclusion. It's really superbe, like we say in French. Merci beaucoup, Paniel. Vraiment, votre conférence est très intéressante, très riche, de par l'originalité, de par l'authenticité, de par la clarté. Et bon, peut-être on a des questions. Moi, personnellement, I have some questions to ask you. And first, I will give the opportunity to the participants with us if they have questions, especially Nina Morgan. Welcome. Thank you for being with us. You are in California now, and I'm very glad that you are my guest. Jérôme, merci beaucoup, Jérôme, d'être avec nous ce soir. Je pense qu'on a tous des questions à te poser, and je vais laisser mes questions après. Jérôme, oui?
Oui, je veux bien commencer. Yeah, also I will ask the question in English.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Paniel. It's a beautiful talk, and pragmatism and spirituality is a fascinating topic. And I think both are not well understood, so it's a very important thing to. And also, I think pragmatism could be the future of philosophy beyond, the analytical and the continental philosophies that fight between each other. I think pragmatism a lot of to teach us. So I have few questions. First, pragmatism is usually deeply linked to the spirit of scientific inquiry, in which to learn is not only to think, but to act, to do some experiments, to be an agent, to have some agency. So my first question is, in what sense the pragmatic way to properly examine spiritual experiences should or should not become close to scientific methodology? So that's the first question. The second question is to understand spiritual experience. How important is it to determine the ontological or the metaphysical ground of the experience? And would it be better to stay in the realm of phenomenology of aneroscopy, like maybe William James does, or maybe do we need to be more clear about ontological or metaphysical ground? And do you think it's important to clarify that? And the third aspect is about something that most people don't know, but I think it's an interesting in Peirce, is what he calls a neglected argument. In the history of theology and philosophy, there are a lot of proof that God exists. I'm not going to go into all those debates of proofs that God exists, but there is an interesting argument by Peirce related to that, in which he's not trying to prove that God exists, but he says that there is a good reason to believe in God based on our religious experience, and he explained all the methodology does, and he explained exactly how we can do that experiment and why it's a very rational reason to believe in God, and it's not a scientific definitive proof. But I think it's a line of thinking that is very pragmatic, and it's an interesting contribution to the debate.
Lovely. Thank you. Merci, Jérôme. I love the questions. I'm going to go in the same order. So the first question is about why this is beyond the interest of science, right? Is more than the description of what Peirce would call a community of inquiry. It goes beyond that. It goes to how Josiah Royce envisioned this massive insight of Peirce cannot be reduced to community of inquiry. It has to be also expanded to the community of interpretation and to the community of the beautiful, as he would have said. And I think there's reasons to believe that Peirce himself so envisioned this. Well, let me say two things. One is that Peirce saw that he made a statement that only Josiah Royce was the only one understanding the depth of his pragmatism. And as many of you know, and Hamdi actually mentioned it before, Peirce changed it. I mean, in the literature, sometimes we find the word pragmatism. Peirce would have said a word ugly enough to be safe from kidnappers, because he wasn't liking what people were making of pragmatism as a philosophy of let's do what works, or something like that, of expediency. So yes, in that sense, Peirce believed that his pragmatism was intrinsically connected to metaphysical understanding of reality, which he called scholastic realism. And it was an extreme understanding of reality as pervaded by universals, for example, for real, or what he called real generals. However, in doing, and of course, this makes very good sense when it's connected to the theory of inquiry that he presents, how we find patterns in experience and we elevate them to potential possible experience by doing hypotheses that he called abduction. However, he himself came to realize, especially in the later stage of his life, he came to realize that there was a linkage between what he called the three normative sciences. He first developed an architectonic system of sciences based not in cataloging the products of science, but in cataloging the activities that we do from the more general universal kind of understanding of things to the more specific nuanced aspect of habits of understanding things that can develop from them. So in this sense, he thought that there were three normative sciences. And he thinks, and he surprises us by saying this, because he thinks that the three normative sciences are aesthetics, ethics, and logic. Now, the funny thing, though, is that logic is sublated. It depends on ethics. And ethics depends on aesthetics. So why? Why would he say something like that? Well, Peirce proposes something like this. Think about the basic command of logic. What is what we want to achieve when we do logical inference, where we want to achieve truth preservation. So the set of operations that we do to understand things and to understand the logic of things is in order to see how truth is preserved through inference. So the commandment, the normative aspect of logic is that you shall say always the truth and never say something that is not true. Like you're obliged to say something that is true. But then this is some kind of ethical command. So in that sense, logic depends on ethics, and ethics depends on what is considered the good, what is considered the ideal in a set of possible scenarios in which things work in different ways. But in order to recognize what is good, Peirce says, ethics depends on aesthetics, because the capacity to recognize what is good comes from the capacity of finding the admirable in itself and not in interest, and admirable in itself, but not derived from a personal or a particular different interest. What is admirable in itself. So in this sense, and this is very Platonic, obviously, you probably see that now, the kalokagatia, right? But the idea is that in order to be logical, one has to be ethical. And in order to be ethical, one has to be aesthetic, or have to have this aesthetic sensibility to the admirable. So in this sense, and I move from this to your second question, for example, what he calls the neglected argument for the reality of God, is what he calls the marriage between science and religion comes from the appreciation of how things hangs together in the universe as an arrangement that the more we understand, the more harmony and beauty is reflected on it, and the more it points us towards something that is infinitely beautiful and unlimitedly good, which is God. So in this sense, the two, let me scroll back a little bit and get back to the questions. So yes, these ideas were initially, Peirce, as a scientist, he proposed a theory of inquiry that pretends to be a theory that is a self-controlled inquiry. And in order to do that, he uses the logical principle that he called the pragmatic maxim. But the more we practice this pragmatic maxim and this pragmatism, the more some patterns emerge and a body of beliefs about the universe are constructed, and then we're more sensitive to the overall kind of picture of a reality that is beyond us. So in that sense, the two things seem to be connected, at least in Peirce. And of course, Josiah Royce saw that as an intimation to construct the hope of the great community, the hope of a community that is unlimited on time and in the future, but it will grow in quality of the relationships between each other and in love, and it will collect and preserve the insights of heroic human beings that have given their life for these values and make a better world out of it. So in that sense, I think the two things are connected. Obviously, not straightforwardly, not as clearly as I try to put it, but of course, what Jerome presented made me think that yes, this pragmatism that was initially proposed for scientific inquiry can finally give us an inkling into a more deeper understanding of the connections of the different aspects of experience in reality, including the experience of the divine, which is not always, like Jerome, you said very clearly, very, very correctly, that it doesn't come from, it's not a deduction of God. It's not that we the neglected argument, is not that we deduce, therefore God must exist. We are invited to appreciate things in such a way that makes ever so more plausible to think that there's this reality that is infinite and an unlimited source of betterment of reality. I don't know if I answered Jerome.
Oui, merci beaucoup.
Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions à poser à Paniel? En tout cas, from my side, pour ma part, Paniel, je ne suis pas d'accord avec vous. I don't agree with you when you, comment dirais-je, vous confinez Peirce dans la dimension de la priméité ou de la firstness. C'est-à-dire, vous mettez Peirce, qui est celui qui a inventé enfin, ce schéma un peu sémiotique, qui dit que c'est un schéma qui finalement, c'est vrai, qu'on passe d'une étape à une autre, ou enfin, dans l'interprétation, on doit regarder, placer un peu nos interprétants par rapport à des signes selon des niveaux, mais lui, il est pour ce schéma de façon insécable. C'est-à-dire, euh, Peirce, I think we must find Peirce in the thirdness and secondness and thirdness. And I think it's, uh, it's a pity that you place him only in the thirdness, dans ce que nous appelons la priméité. Et peut-être, c'est vrai, c'est peut-être là-bas où il faut chercher la spiritualité, parce que la priméité, c'est là, c'est l'espace inconditionné, indéterminé, primitif, sauvage, ouvert, et qu'on ne peut pas vraiment, qui est énigmatique, qui n'est pas réel, qui est composé de tout ce qui est possible, tout ce qui est imaginable dans notre condition humaine. Et ça d'abord, mais ma deuxième question, c'est-à-dire, je suis tout à fait d'accord sur le fait que vous reliez le pragmatisme et l'empirisme en même temps avec la spiritualité, mais je pense est-ce qu'il n'y a pas, c'est vrai, on ne peut pas être détaché de notre environnement de vie, de notre monde, au sens sensoriel, au sens d'impression, etc., au sens Mais on peut pas être détaché, mais est-ce que il faut trouver la spiritualité normalement, non pas dans des sensations ou dans des expériences de goût ou des expériences, etc., mais plutôt dans des éléments qui échappent qui sortent de ça, c'est-à-dire comme le silence, par exemple, ou comme l'intuition, ou comme d'autres éléments qui sont à la fois euh, dans l'ordre naturel, mais qui donnent à autre chose, qui renvoient à autre chose, à une expérience tout à fait religieuse ou une expérience du divin, comme tu l'as appelé. J'espère que mon français, Paniel, peut permettre de comprendre un peu ce que je veux dire. Sinon, je peux parler en anglais, mais au risque de ne pas être très vraiment clair. Panier, je crois qu'il y a un problème de connexion. Ah, il va revenir. Je suis
Now,
désolé.
now we have to finish. We have to finish the conversation without him.
I hope he will connect back.
I don't know.
I'm sorry for my questions. They make him.
Back. He's
Ah,
back.
He's back.
Sorry,
Daniel,
sorry. I was calling my
we
brother
lost you for a few seconds. We lost you.
yes, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No,
The
it's okay.
connection wasn't great. And I was fascinated by your question and your observation. And I mean, as far as I understood, because it was cut at the middle, and I'm so sorry
No,
about
no,
that.
it's okay. No.
But I did.
Ce sont les aléas du direct. Donc,
Okay, something's happening.
okay.
Keeps. Can
Is
you
it
hear me
okay?
now?
Yes.
Well,
C'est dommage, it's a pity that you have troubles with your internet connection.
yeah.
Nina, what do you think about what he said about postmodern philosophy? I think
Oh
maybe you
yeah,
can
well,
have you
I have to
react.
complain.
You have to react about this.
I have a strong complaint. And I wanted to, of course, compliment the lecture for tackling the issue of spirituality. I think it's probably extremely difficult for philosophers and scientists to address this issue, and I think he's working hard at it. But I do think it's problematic to create a representation of in the way that he does, that it saying that it's he said postmodernism, but one can guess that post-structuralism is involved here. Derrida's whole revision of Saussure and Peirce is to address this issue of binary oppositions and to, of course, open those binary oppositions to a spectrum. And then, of course, we have Derrida's work on the specter and spectrality. And so I think the idea that somehow postmodernism or post-structuralism is committed to sustaining binary oppositions is not, in my experience, a useful representation of post-structuralism. I guess my question is related to the issue of the role of language and to this term richness, which I don't understand as a term, richness. It has an evaluation, very positive connotation. And I like all of us here, we all speak multiple languages, some better than others, and English here, Spanish there, Arabic here, Russian, French. But and people will say, oh, well, if you speak multiple languages, you have a richer experience of the world. You know more, you understand more, you have more understanding and this kind of thing. But we might look at certain figures in the world, since war was brought up, someone like Netanyahu, who clearly speaks multiple languages and lacks spirituality altogether, one would guess.
Of course.
I kind of have a question about this overarching concept of richness. Of course, I have a criticism of representing post-structuralists as sustaining binary oppositions when Derrida's major works deconstruct binary oppositions and dichotomies. And then I have a question about why, in your interest in scientists and artists, you don't move toward the already established idea of experimentation, experience and experimentation, because both artists and scientists are.
Yes. Thank you for the questions.
I apologize that you missed my compliment because you were.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, my connection has been a bit rubbish, really, because it unplugged me exactly where I was listening to the core of the question from Ham, and then when I was just about to reply. So quick, I'm gonna say a quick word. Yes, about what Hamdi his remarks on what he was saying. I completely agree with you. I did a bit of an oversimplification, right? Leaving the fairness just to Peirce. Obviously, there's aspects of other thinkers that are perfectly suitable to be included there, especially the ones who. I was going to say, I mean, I've been studying for some years the relationship between mathematical insight and and artistic insight, and I think they're qualitatively not very different experiences. But I was thinking on Peirce for the purpose of kind of giving the big picture of the book. Peirce would have been a good representative of the firstness, but he's still being mentioned on the secondness and the thirdness because the whole scheme of firstness, secondness, and thirdness is his proposal, his categorical proposal. So yes, I completely agree with you. And what I did was a bit of an oversimplification. And I would say the same to Nina. When I kind of said, maybe it was a very bold claim to say that postmodernism extends the dichotomies of modernity. I know there's a very fair criticism of postmodernism, of the different dichotomies of modernity. I won't say binaries, because binary is something that is intrinsically, for example, a binary is something that is composed of two aspects, but they're not opposed. Whereas dichotomies are oppositions. So in that sense, I think what both pragmatism and some criticism of, for example, some of the great achievements of deconstruction is to understand that things are intrinsically linked in a spectrum of expression in different possibilities. So, for example, when there's I agree. I think, for example, Derrida is a good example of somebody who criticizes some of the intrinsic dichotomies of modernity. Now, the issue, though, it seems to me that, and you brought this as well with the question on language, the issue, I think, could be just remain at the level of a discourse that doesn't necessarily connect with experience. So we in other words, what Rorty calls, we live in our vocabularies, and as much as what we know is what we speak about, and we call true what is approved by our community of vocabulary, and we call false whatever is not in my friends and I, right? Is not what is not approved by our community or our group. So in that sense, what pragmatism offers is and I also embrace your observation about the richness of experience. Well, when I say the richness of experience, I'm already kind of approving some kind of view of experience. Yes, I agree. But the idea is that in what we live, we cannot exclude anything that is lived, but in our account of what we live, everything that it comes across, is manifested to us, has to be included in our account of what we live. And in that sense, what we call experience is a continuous set of realities that present themselves to us. They have a priority compared to our reflection on them. And in that sense, even if language predisposes us in good or better ways to that experience that we live the day by day, doesn't necessarily makes us. I mean, there's obviously language is not a monolithic kind of. When we talk about people who speak many languages, like Hamdi, for example, who is a very clever fellow, what we do is we recognize that there's an articulation of some aspects of experience that are better captured by this polysemy. However, it doesn't mean that what we said about the normative sciences is not included in that linguistic ability, as it were. We have to recognize the sort of what is independent of us in the patterns of experience. And I mean, as much as it's mediated by language, it doesn't necessarily depend on language. It depends on things that sometimes are unknown to us, and that language is incapable of mediating in the best way possible. For example, what we call the ineffable in the context of religious experience.
So richness is not tied to language.
I think it's related to language, but it's not tied to language. Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay, interesting.
Yes.
Paniel, you was talking about the richness of experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think not of language in your conference.
Yeah, and this word richness of experience was presented as opposed to the fragmentary visions of experience, like British empiricists.
So Vienna Circle
experience,
and,
as reduced to sense of perception, for example.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you.
Very good observations. Thank you both.
Thank you, because your conference is good. That's why.
You're too kind.
You have what you deserve. What you deserve. Good questions, good conference.
Thank you very much indeed.
Hamdi,
well, I
Yes,
guess
please.
our time is coming to an end, but I'm happy to respond to more observations, questions, or
yes,
like
please. If you
don't
hesitate to ask Paniel, because he is not always with us online. Ahmed, my colleague.
Thank you, Hamdi. I would like to thank Dr. Paniel for this very interesting talk. I would like to address you two brief questions. We have a widespread idea, which is very positive when it comes to spirituality. This idea considers that spirituality is always a beneficial thing for the life of the society, of the community, of the individuals, even. That spirituality is meant to establish understanding, tolerance, self-control, and inner peace. But in some contexts, especially when it is connected with political actions and activities and thoughts, it leads to conflict, to extremism, and in some contexts to terrorism. Now, this is my first question. My second question is, do you think that the religious beliefs in the history of humanity was created and established to rule the society and the community, or to regenerate it? And thank you very much, Dr. Paniel.
Well, those are excellent questions, Professor Iman. I appreciate them very much. Yes, there is the contested issue of what counts as a genuine spiritual experience, right? Yes, it's a very delicate issue, because of course what I'm trying to present here is not putting myself on a pedestal and saying this counts as good, this doesn't count as good. What we try to present is how philosophy can help us to distinguish what's genuinely the report of something that is beyond us, but is also transformative. But what the criterion that in which James interprets this is exactly by their fruits. So in a way, and I think there's valuable elements both in James and in Royce. In the case of James, he says that if the fruits, it could be a person who had a hallucination. Maybe we can, diagnose somebody who had this kind of malaria mosquito by this person and had this weird dream, etc., etc. But if the fruits contribute to the betterment of these transformative experiences for the good in humanity, why do we dismiss it altogether? Why do we not take it as why wouldn't a spiritual experience will come hand in hand with a hallucination, which is, some communities, anthropologically speaking, some communities use. There's a very recent study on this by I can't remember the name of the authors, but the idea is that many communities believe that the use of psychotropics will facilitate the understanding of some symbols or something that are expressed in of a spiritual nature expressed through visions, etc., etc. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't experiment with any of that, and even if the discipline is self-implicating, I don't go that route of self-implication. However, I wouldn't be allowing myself to dismiss them altogether because it's not akin to what I report as a genuine mystical experience, for example. I wouldn't be making myself the judge of those experiences. I will say, let's look at the fruits of that experience. Is this making this person and the community more humanely amenable to each other? Is it giving fruits of moral value? Is it giving fruits of is it improving the life of the community? Is this particular experience compared to the tradition where it comes from integrated to the values and memories and the hopes of that community, and the community accepts that experiences in their interpretation? Then maybe we could say, well, I don't know about the conditions in which this happened, but the fruits seem to be positive. And in that sense, why will we dismiss them as reports of something that is, why will we deny the spiritual value to those experiences? However, there will be cases in which we see that the fruits are actually opposed to the betterment of the community and opposed to the criterion of evaluation that a community of interpretation gives to them in light of their tradition, in light of their hopes. And in that sense, I think there will be good reasons to be suspicious that that's a genuine spiritual experience. But of course, it's not a straightforward process, I'll say. I will say that the cases in which we will have to just wait and see if, before making a judgment. And with the political, second part of the question was the political aspect, wasn't it? So I think, yes, I feel that, at least for example, here in Latin America, at the moment, I'm giving this lecture from Mexico. Maybe that's why the quality of my internet is not fantastic. When I'm in San Antonio, Texas, it's a little bit better connection. Anyway, but here in Latin America, we have the movement of liberation theology, for example, who has been always linked spirituality to the transformation of society into a more just, preferential option for the poor. And in that sense, the spirituality of liberation, I think, even though it doesn't particularly have no, the authors such as Gustavo Gutierrez, who just died last year, who are good examples of people who have a mysticism in action. So in that sense, I don't see, in light of what I said, I think pragmatism will give us a good reason to appreciate spiritualities that are expressed in action, and including political action, yes. But of course, I think there's a set of values, ethical, normative perspectives that help us to see if, I wouldn't call a genuine spirituality that one that is which aims to hurt others and exclude them. I don't know if I answered the question,
Ouais.
Marc.
C'est intéressant. Je pense Ahmed, il a essayé un petit peu de dissocier spiritualité et religion, hein. Donc il prend la religion dans sa dimension spirituelle, spiritualiste plus que dans sa dimension, bon, même s'il revient au social, au communautaire et tout ça, mais il le prend dans le sens spiritualité et mysticisme plus que dans le sens de la politisation, que ce soit l'islam politique ou d'autres manières de se baser à la fois ou de définir une action politique sur la base d'une appartenance religieuse, je pense. Merci beaucoup, Paniel. Juste une dernière question. On peut trouver, we can find some philosophers, American, uh, they are pragmatist or pragmaticist, but they are not ready to put together their pragmatism with any kind or any form of spirituality. I mean, for example, Quine. And I understand really that Quine does not match at all with your this landscape you gave us about pragmatism and spirituality.
All different, yes. That would be a very fascinating topic to talk about, yes. Yeah, but yes, at this particular time, I didn't have the space to explain about how people like Quine could be of interest, or how Quine would have seen this as of interest.
And you think that this is a missing point in Quine's philosophy? Quine was missing ethical and I can say aesthetical questions in his philosophy. Do you think that this is a missing point in his approaches in philosophy?
I have to say, yes, I had this idea. Well, when I did my undergrad degree, I did a first study on Quine. And but then when I did the PhD in philosophy, I did it under a scholar who was both a scholar of Peirce and a scholar of Quine, which is Christopher Hoogway, who died a couple of years ago.
He wrote the bestseller about Quine.
Yes, my late supervisor. And what I have a lot of admiration for Chris Hoogway, because he was able to his students like me, he was able to help us see, maybe if he directly didn't say things about some topics, he did it with the intention of impacting the discussion. So there's obviously not direct mention of mysticism in Quine, or not direct mention of ethical topics or aesthetical issues, as you mentioned very clearly, very correctly. But that doesn't mean that Quine didn't have in view the idea that some of his discussions, some of his proposals will eventually have an impact in these discussions. And I think I owe that to Chris. He was helping me to see there's more underneath of what is one can see at the first
But,
sight.
but anyway, you don't consider him as rejecting this possibility to connect spirituality with pragmatism or pragmatism within his philosophy.
Immediately, no, I don't see him as opposed. However, we will have to clarify eventually, because at this moment or today, I focused on classical pragmatism, but then there's this more kind of contemporary analytical pragmatism that has other ramifications, and obviously we will have to qualify a little bit more. But from starters, I mean, my initial answer will be not necessarily. I don't see him as opposed.
Yeah.
We will
Thank you
have
very
to
much
see
for
more to say that, but more
yes.
about it. Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much, Paniel, for your contribution to our seminar, for all your time and the time you give to us in order to listen and to understand your work, your research, and to talk with you and to be in dialogue with you. If you don't have more questions to Paniel, I will conclude. And I will give you some informations about our next conferences. We will meet, let's speak some French, le 15 janvier, 15 January, with an Egyptian, Salah Osman. He will speak in Arabic language and he will talk about the coherence between logic and Islamic jurisprudence, al-fiqh. So from Alexandria University in Egypt, Salah Osman, 15 January at 7 p.m. time of Paris and Tunis. And then 19 January, we will meet a professor from Beirut University in Lebanon. She will talk about Yahya bin Adi, and she will talk about the problem of evil between the freedom of man and the justice of God. And she will be back to Yahya ibn Adi. He was a Christian philosopher, I think the student of Al-Farabi or in the 10th century. He was translating philosophy, Greek philosophy to Syriac and to Arabic. And it will be a good opportunity to have these good connections in philosophy between Muslims and Christians, and they were working together and in a good harmony. And I will give you a rendezvous appointment 22 January to talk with Roger Puivet, if you know him. He's a good professor from Nancy University in France. He's a specialist of aesthetics and philosophy of art. He will talk about the rationality of good intellectual life. How much a good intellectual life is rational. Okay, so thank you very much for all you did to us today, because this topic is really original and powerful and too much stimulating us. And I wish you good luck with your work, and all our best wishes for the continuity of your work and for the results, of course, of your research.
Thank you, my dear friend Hamdi, and for the invitation. Thank you, everyone, for the amazing questions and observations. I will take everything on board to, use it for my work, and I am very grateful for the invitation again. And thank you, Hamdi, for doing this possible. Is a great labor that you're doing. So with no further ado, merci mon ami.
Like we say in Arabic also, shukran, shukran.
Shukran, shukran. Shukran, habibi.
Thank you. Merci, shukran.